Your phone used to charge fast. Now, it takes forever. You plug it in, and the battery barely moves. 10%, 20%, sometimes even after a long time. It still feels slow, and that can be seriously frustrating, because charging speed is one of those things you only notice when it gets worse. At first, you think maybe it's just the cable, then maybe the charger, then maybe the battery. But here's the surprising truth. A phone charging slowly is usually not caused by just one thing. It could be the charger, the cable, heat, battery health, charging settings, dust inside the port, or the phone limiting speed on purpose. So even though it feels like your phone is getting weak, what's really happening is that something is reducing how much power your phone can safely accept. Today we're breaking down why your phone charges slower than before, what's actually happening during charging, and how to figure out what is slowing it down. But before we dive in, if you enjoy simple explanations of phones, tech problems, and how devices really work, subscribe. Because on this channel we break down complex tech topics and make them easy to understand. First, what charging speed really depends on. Before we talk about the causes, we need to understand what charging speed actually is. When you plug in your phone, your charger is not simply pouring battery into the device. Charging is controlled, managed, and constantly adjusted. Your phone, charger, and cable all work together. The charger provides power. The cable carries it, and the phone decides how much power it will accept. That last part is important, because your phone does not always charge at maximum speed. It only charges as fast as it safely can under the current conditions. That means charging speed depends on things like power from the charger, cable quality, battery temperature, battery health, screen usage during charging, and software power management. So when charging becomes slower, it usually means one part of that system is limiting the process. Second, a weak charger is one of the most common causes. Let's start with one of the biggest reasons: the charger itself. Not all chargers are equal. Some deliver high power, some deliver very little, and some may look fast, but are actually not giving your phone what it needs. This becomes a problem when you switch chargers, use an old adapter, use a cheap replacement, or plug into a weak USB source. For example, charging from a proper fast charger is very different from charging through an old wall adapter, a laptop USB port, a power strip USB port, or a low-quality charging brick. Your phone may still charge, but much more slowly. And sometimes people think the phone got worse, when the real issue is that the power source changed. So if your phone charges slower than before, the first thing to question is not always the phone. Sometimes it's simply the charger feeding it less power. Third, the cable can secretly slow everything down. Now let's talk about the cable. This is one of the most overlooked causes of slow charging, because the cable seems simple, but it matters a lot. A charging cable is not just a wire. Its internal quality affects how efficiently power reaches the phone. Cheap cables, damaged cables, or worn-out cables may reduce charging speed dramatically. Some cables can charge, but not fast charge. Others develop internal resistance over time. That means power is lost before it even reaches the battery. This is why a phone may charge normally with one cable, but painfully slowly with another. And sometimes the cable looks fine from the outside. No tear, no obvious break, no visible damage. But inside, the wiring may already be degraded. So yes, a cable can be the whole reason your phone charges slower than before. Fourth, dust and lint in the charging port. This cause is very common, and many people completely miss it. Your phone's charging port collects dust over time. Lint from pockets, tiny debris, dirt, and all kinds of small particles. At first, that buildup seems harmless, but eventually, it can prevent the charging connector from fitting properly. And when the connection is not solid, charging becomes unstable or slower. In some cases, the phone may only charge at a certain angle. In others, it charges but keeps disconnecting, or it switches between charging speeds. This is important because fast charging often depends on a clean, stable connection. If the port is partially blocked, your phone may fall back to slower charging. So even though the charger and cable are fine, the power transfer is no longer reliable, and a tiny bit of dirt can create a surprisingly big slowdown. Fifth, heat makes phones charge more slowly on purpose. Now we get to one of the most important causes: heat. Phones do not like charging when they are too hot. That's because charging creates heat by itself. And if the phone is already warm from use, the battery temperature rises even more. Modern phones are designed to protect the battery from excess heat. So when the device gets too warm, it intentionally reduces charging speed. Not because it is broken, but because it is protecting the battery. This often happens when you charge while gaming, charge in direct sunlight, use navigation while plugged in, fast charge with a thick case on, or leave many demanding apps running. From your point of view, it feels like the charger became weak. But from the phone's point of view, it is slowing things down to avoid damage. So a hot phone charging slowly is often behaving exactly as designed. 6. Battery health changes charging behavior. Now let's talk about battery aging. Over time, phone batteries wear out. That's normal. They don't just lose capacity. They also become less efficient and less stable. And as battery health declines, charging behavior can change too. An older battery may charge more inconsistently, heat up faster, accept power less efficiently, or trigger more protective limits. That means even if your charger is good and your cable is fine, the phone may still charge slower than it used to, because the battery itself is no longer in peak condition. This is especially noticeable on older phones. At first, you notice battery life getting shorter. Later, you may also notice that charging feels slower or less reliable. So when a phone charges slower than before, battery age is often part of the story, even when it is not the only cause. 7th, fast charging does not always stay fast. A lot of people assume fast charging means the phone should charge at top speed the entire time. But that's not how charging works. Fast charging is usually strongest at lower battery percentages. Then it slows down on purpose. Why? Because lithium-ion batteries charge in stages. Early in the charge cycle, the phone can safely accept more power. But as the battery fills up, the charging speed reduces to protect battery health. So the phone may go from very fast at 10% to slower at 70%, and much slower near 90 or 100%. That is normal, not a fault. The problem is that many people compare the fastest part of charging to the slowest part later on, and assume the phone has become worse. Sometimes it has, but sometimes it is just following normal battery behavior. So part of slow charging is really about where you are in the charging cycle. 8th, using the phone while charging slows it down. This one is simple, but very important. If you heavily use your phone while charging, it will charge more slowly, because the charger is not only filling the battery, it is also powering the phone at the same time. So if you are watching videos, gaming, video calling, using hotspot, recording content, or running heavy apps, part of the incoming power is immediately being used up. That leaves less power available to increase the battery level. This can make charging feel painfully slow, and in extreme cases, the battery may barely rise at all, especially if the charger is weak or the phone is hot. This is why a phone can seem to charge fine when left alone, but charge slowly when actively used. The phone is not necessarily failing. You are just consuming power while trying to add power. 9th, software and charging settings can also matter. Now let's look at software. Sometimes charging speed changes after an update, or because of certain charging settings. Modern phones often include battery protection features like optimized charging, adaptive charging, scheduled charging, or battery health protection modes. These features intentionally slow or delay charging in some situations, especially overnight, or when the phone predicts you will stay plugged in for a long time. This is done to reduce battery wear. So your phone may not always race to 100% immediately. It may slow down on purpose. Also, a software bug can sometimes affect charging behavior too. After updates, some users notice slower charging, heat issues, or power management problems. So if charging speed suddenly changes after a software update, software may be part of the explanation. 10th, cheap accessories can break the fast charging system. Another big problem is accessory compatibility. Fast charging usually depends on specific standards, and your phone may require the right combination of charger, cable, and charging protocol. If one part does not support the correct standard, fast charging may not activate. Then the phone falls back to slower charging. This is why some phones charge quickly only with certain chargers or certified cables. A cheap accessory might still work, but only at basic speed. And that can make it seem like your phone has gotten worse, when really the fast charging handshake is no longer happening properly. So if your phone once charged quickly and now does not, a non-compatible accessory may be quietly causing the downgrade. 11th, wireless charging is usually slower. This one matters too. If you switched from wired charging to wireless charging, you may simply be seeing a slower method. Wireless charging is convenient, but it is often less efficient than wired charging. It also creates more heat, and that extra heat can make the phone reduce speed even more. So while wireless charging feels modern and easy, it often charges slower than a good wired fast charger. And if the phone or charger alignment is slightly off, speed can drop further. That does not mean something is broken. It just means convenience often comes with a speed trade-off. 12th, how to tell what's probably slowing it down. So how do you narrow it down? Start with the pattern. If the phone charges slowly only with one charger, the charger is suspicious. If it changes with one cable, the cable may be the issue. If it slows down when the phone gets warm, heat is likely involved. If the charging port feels loose, or the cable does not click in firmly, check the port for dirt or wear. If the phone charges slowly mostly at high battery percentages, that may be normal charging behavior. If it became slow after an update, software may be involved. And if the phone is older and also has worse battery life, battery health may be part of the problem. The key idea is this: slow charging is rarely just random. There is usually a reason, and patterns help you find it. 13th, what you should do first. If your phone charges slower than before, start with the simple checks. Try a known good charger. Try a different cable. Inspect the charging port carefully. Let the phone cool down before charging. Remove a thick case. Stop heavy use while charging. Check whether fast charging is enabled in settings if your phone supports that. Also pay attention to whether the slowdown happens all the time, or only under certain conditions. That matters, because a phone that always charges slowly points to a different issue than one that slows down only when hot or heavily used. And if your battery is old, or the phone has other power problems, then battery replacement may eventually be the real fix. 14th, the biggest mistake people make. The biggest mistake people make is blaming only the battery. Yes, battery health matters, but it is not always the main reason. Sometimes the real cause is a weak charger, a bad cable, a dirty port, excess heat, or a charging setting doing exactly what it was designed to do. Another mistake is assuming that if the phone is charging, everything must be fine. That is not true. A phone can still charge, but much more slowly than it should. And that hidden slowdown often means some part of the charging system is no longer working properly. So the goal is not just to see whether charging happens. It is to understand whether charging is happening normally. So what's really happening? When your phone charges slower than before, it usually means one thing. Something is limiting how much power the phone can safely receive. That limit may come from the charger, the cable, heat, battery health, software controls, a dirty charging port, or accessory compatibility problems. So the phone is not simply bad at charging. It is responding to a condition. And once you identify that condition, the slowdown becomes much easier to explain. Your phone usually doesn't start charging slowly for no reason. There is almost always a pattern behind it. A weaker charger, a worn cable, a hot battery, a dirty port, an aging battery, or the phone protecting itself on purpose. And the faster you identify that pattern, the easier it becomes to fix the real problem. Because in tech, what looks like one simple issue on the surface usually has a deeper reason underneath. If you enjoyed this breakdown and want more simple explanations of phone problems, gadgets, and how technology really works, subscribe. Because here we break down the hidden reasons behind everyday tech problems, so you can understand exactly how they work. And in the next video, we'll break down another phone issue that confuses a lot of people. I'll see you in the next one.